Welcome to News9 Mediaverse, and you are watching On Point with me. Israel has now openly declared that there will be a three-stage operation in Gaza. What is this three-stage operation? Which part of the operation is in process now? When will the second stage of operation come into existence? What is the third stage of operation? What is the political objective of the operation? What are the strategic aim and advantage which the Israel will gain from the operation? Are the questions we are going to answer. And I'll be joined by Colonel Marie Eisen, Director, International Institute for Counter-Terrorism, Reichman University from Israel. I'll also be joined by Dan Pfifferman, Israel Defence Forces, Executive Director, Sharaka. And I'll be joined by Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hassanein of the Indian Army. But before that, what did the Defence Minister of Israel say in context of this three-stage operation? When is it going to commence? Or is the world witnessing the first stage itself when it was thinking that the operation has not started at all? Let's first listen in to the bite of the Defence Minister of Israel.
אני חושב שהמפגש הזה הוא מפגש חשוב מאוד. מי שיושב פה מסביב לשולחן מייצג את עם ישראל. כל אחד מהזווית שלו, ולכן לעצם המפגש בפורום הרחב הזה במשרד הביטחון תוך כדי מלחמה יש ערך מאוד גבוה, ואני מתכוון לפרט בפניכם את הדברים. מה שקרה ב-7 באוקטובר מביא למצב חדש באזור ובמזרח התיכון בהרבה מאוד היבטים, ואני רוצה להסביר למה אני מתכוון. החמאס חשב שזה יהיה יום הסמל שבו הוא יודיע על ניצחונו הגדול וייצב מצב אחר, והפך את המשוואה ב-180 מעלות. היום הזה צריך להיזכר כיום שבו החל התהליך שגורם לכך שארגון החמאס נמחק מעל פני האדמה, לא פחות מזה. אנחנו מסובבים את זה ב-180 מעלות מחדש, ובקצה מסבירים לכל מי שרוצה לשמוע. מי שמתכוון לרצוח ילדים במדינת ישראל ולהרוג זקנים ולקחת בשבי נשים ולאנוס אותם, אנחנו נמחק אותו, לא פחות מזה. ולכן המלחמה הזאת היא מלחמת אין ברירה. היא אין ברירה במובן הזה שאנחנו לא נוכל להמשיך ולהתקיים כאן ללא הרתעה, וללא זה שכולם יבינו שלפעולה ברברית ולהתקפה על מדינת ישראל יש מחיר שהוא מחיר שאי אפשר להתמודד איתו. ולכן אני אציג בפניכם גם את המטרות, אני אציג בפניכם גם את שלבי המערכה, כי אנחנו תוך כדי תכנון תהליך שקורה בהתקלות שאותה עוד נתחקר. יש לנו הרבה מה לעשות, הרבה מה ללמוד, ולכל הדברים יש מקום, אבל באופן כללי יהיו פה 3 שלבים עקרוניים. ראשית, אנחנו נמוטט את ארגון החמאס, נשמיד את התשתיות הצבאיות שלו והשלטוניות שלו. זה דבר ראשון. זה שלב שלא יהיה קל, יהיו לו מחירים. אנחנו נצטרך פה את התמיכה של כולנו על העניין הזה בצה"ל. שלב הבא אחריו יהיה יותר ממושך. יש שלב של ייצוב המערכת, ובסופו של דבר באיזשהו שלב אנחנו נגיע למצב שיש פה משטר ביטחוני אחר לגמרי, יש לנו חופש פעולה מוחלט ושאין שום איום מתוך רצועת עזה. זה לא יום וזה לא שבוע ולצערי גם לא חודש. את זה צריך להבין, אבל זה התהליך. לכן בנושא הזה אני חושב שאנחנו נחושים, יש אחדות דעות בתוך הקבינט, ואנחנו נעים על הנתיב הזה. אז לאחר מכן אני אפרט קצת יותר בהרחבה את כל מה שאמרתי, את הכיוונים ואת המימוש. מטבע הדברים אי אפשר לפרט את כל דבר, אבל אני חושב שהמסגרת הזאת היא מסגרת ברורה. תודה רבה לכם.
So I think very clearly, Aditya, the Defence Minister have spoken that it's going to be a three-stage operation. It means that it's going to take a long time. It's not going to be an operation in quick succession.
Karthikeya, from the very first day we've been discussing here on your show that it's not going to be easy and it's not going to be short. It's going to be a long haul, and I should in fact say that we almost had discussed what the Defence Minister Gallant has really said. If I can just take you through the 3 stages that he mentions. He says we are now in the first stage, a military campaign that currently includes strikes and will later include maneuvering and the objective of neutralizing terrorists and destroying Hamas infrastructure. The second phase will be an intermediate one, will require operations at lower intensity with the objective of eliminating pockets of resistance, remaining terror hotspots. And the third and the final phase will require the removal of Israel's responsibility for life in the Gaza Strip and the establishment of a new security reality for the citizens of Israel. Already, Benjamin Netanyahu and his ministers have been emphasizing that we'll bring a paradigm shift. How people saw Gaza will completely change after this war.
Okay. Now let me take our viewers through some details. A part of it that has been explained by Aditya, my colleague. So this is the 3-stage operation which the Israelis are talking about. Now, what is the first stage? I'll tell you. Then I'll tell you about the second stage. Then I'm going to tell you about the third stage. Because all these stages will tell us what the Israelis are planning to do. So the first stage is neutralize the terrorists. Second stage is lower intensity ops to eliminate remaining terror hotspots. That's the second stage. And then will come the third stage. And third stage is important. Establishment of a new security reality in the region. Security reality, I'm sure they are talking about the leadership. I'm sure they are talking about a new structure of governance in Gaza, because I'm sure that it means that they will be leaving Gaza and the Gaza will be left to the Gazans for themselves to govern. Now, there are other aspects of this conflict. Now, elimination of Hamas, that's number one objective of Gaza operation. Number one objective of Gaza operation, destroy Hamas military and governing capabilities. Hamas has got military strength and it has got civil rights, for example, political rights, for example, that they govern cities, they govern the political activity. They also have the control of the police, judicial and military affairs to do away with that. And complete removal of Israel's responsibility from Gaza Strip, which means that Israel will do what is needful but will not end up holding the baby in its hand, if I have to put it very bluntly, in the sense that this responsibility to govern the strip will be given back to the new regime. Who will they be? That is something different, but this is the line. Establish a new security situation in the region, a reality, that's the word, a new reality. So which means that the reality will have to be chipped, it has to be made, it has to be put in place, or it has to be genuinely created. It's like watering a plant for it to grow, a new leadership, something which India in many places have been able to do that after revocation of Article 370, when India did away, sideline the separatists. It's trying to create new, fresh leadership in Kashmir, and it is paying India great dividends. Now, 360,000 reservists have been deployed. I'm just giving a sense of detail to people. People think that army operations are like Hollywood films. No, they are not. 170,000, 170,000, that's the strength of the IDF. That's what I'm talking about. Then, when I talk about the strength, I also talk about the armor. 1,000 tanks, roughly 1,000 tanks. And Reuters has also now reported that. NYT has also reported that. That's something which is 4 miles up the Erez crossing. Why 4 miles up the Erez crossing is something which a lot of people are speculating. Because Erez crossing is like this. If this is the Gaza Strip, Erez crossing is here. It's 4 miles up. Why all the tanks and armored personnel are there? We'll talk to our guests about it. Civil defense forces in position. Some people say 20,000, some people say 25,000. But the competition is here that there are 40,000 fighters which Hamas claims. That's what they have. So that's the resistance. Hezbollah, on the other hand, they claim that they've got 1 lakh fighters. And Hezbollah, they have fought in Syria, they have fought in Lebanon. So their arc of experience is far bigger in terms of military experience. I've seen it myself in Syria. And I'm including this. India conducted Operation Power in Sri Lanka. Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain wrote a beautiful article today. I have taken portions from that. He's there in the show, and he will take us through basically to tell us that such operations are always tough. And he has given an Indian example, Lieutenant General. And when their 20,000 soldiers were deployed, 500 were killed in action. 500 were killed in action. It was called Operation Pavan. India went against LTTE. But anyway, we are talking about Gaza. And and 500 killed in action against LTTE. What were used? Booby traps and other things. Now, when I was talking about erased crossing, this is the erased crossing. That's the Rafah border. That's where people want to leave Gaza Strip from. And the interesting part is, most of the armor that has been reported in wires is somewhere here, 4 kilometers from here. Now, most of the journalists have gone here because that's the visuals that are available to us. So we will ask our experts why most of the deployment has taken place in context of the armor. So that's one. So just to give you an idea of the erased crossing, Rafah border, and this is northern Gaza Strip. This is southern Gaza, that's Egypt. And I would say in 1980-81, that's where most of the tunnels started. You know, they used to smuggle cars from those tunnels. Now I'll tell you about the larger complexity, and then we can start a discussion. Why maybe Israel is taking so much of time? Because everyone has its own security reality. There are multiple fronts which Israel has to deal with. And if this is Israel, this is Lebanon, this is Syria here, this is Jordan, and this is Egypt. That's where the Hezbollah fighters are, Hezbollah fighters. The terrorists, I would use the word Hezbollah terrorists. That's where the Hamas terrorists are. This is West Bank. It's a mixed territory. 40% of it is only governed directly by Israelis, 40 or 50% are part of it, and rest of them is under Palestinian Authority, mixed localities. Already a lot of arrests have taken place here, a lot of people have died, there's a settlement issue here, because of which, if people recall the Sheikh Jarrah skirmish which led to 2021 10-day war, so it's a complex situation. Now let me straight away go to Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hussain. Sir, am I audible to you?
Absolutely, thank you.
It's a brilliant article, you know, I had great time reading it. My colleague Aditya forwarded it to me. I really want to know, is there a learning curve for the Israeli forces when you wrote about Operation Pavan?
See, Karthikeya, I wrote about Operation Pavan from personal experience, and I felt that in an impending battle of this kind, you have to prepare the battlefield. In the case of the Indian Army, the IPKF in Sri Lanka, we failed to do it. We thought it was going to be a cakewalk. It was one of those early years when not too many armies were experienced in the various vistas of urban warfare. So we went in with very little armor. We had no idea about the possible use of improvised explosive devices, how small teams of guerrillas can actually emerge and re-emerge from behind us in areas which we had already captured, and that how important it is to make sure you consolidate before you advance any further. All this we failed to do. We did not have the right maps with us. We were using tourist maps to take artillery shoots. We did not have enough artillery with us. Now most of these things have been overcome. I can see that the IDF has actually got a very good measure of all this that I have pointed out to you. But maybe perhaps where the failings are, they did not, despite knowing everything about the tunneling and the tunnel systems, etc., they somehow did not cater for this as a part of their ongoing, mid-intensity, low-intensity conflict with Hamas all these years. Why were they permitted to be made, first of all? So this is something which will always be an issue with the IDF. Secondly, I'm sure they have the intelligence. They've got the full mapping of this. It's also called the Gaza Metro very commonly, and the IDF. So I'm sure they've got a full measure of all this with them. What you're looking at in these three phases is a typical military operation, offensive operation, which is a preparatory stage, an assault stage, and a reorganization stage. All those things which they have spoken fit into these three stages which any army in the world would adopt. But I must compliment you and your team for extracting from this plan, this three-stage plan, all the nuances very correctly and putting them out to your listeners.
Oh, thank you so much, General Hussain. it means a lot for you to say this to me. Thank you. Let me go across to Colonel Miri Eisen. Thank you so much for joining me again. I think it makes
It's a pleasure being here. And if I can just compliment you before we start, that was probably the most clear description that I have heard in the last 2 weeks of what's going on here. And I am just amazed to be in this conversation where you just presented this so clearly.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really honored for you to say this. Can you just take us through why maximum deployment has taken place 4 miles north of Erez crossing? That has been reported by NYT. Let me quote the source also, where they have geolocated the firings in the northern Gaza, various localities, and they've said that's where the armor is. So for our viewers, why is armor there on the north of the strip? Why isn't the armor located on the southern sides, the other side? Can you just take us through why?
So the first thing is that I don't believe everything that even journalists say. The whole area surrounding the Gaza Strip, and you have a wonderful map that you've been showing there, is a closed military area, so that what they're describing is where they can get to, but they cannot get into what we're going to call the staging area right now. But the most important part is really how Israel very clearly is trying to go after the Hamas terrorist infrastructure that you described so eloquently. And what we've done pretty much from the first 3 days is we have been telling the civilians, million people of the northern Gaza Strip, to move south. This isn't about playing around in games. We are going to attack the north. So in that sense, the deployment to go in a ground operation in the north is going to come from that area. You don't need to deploy near the south. We have given this warning time and time again. We have done it in every way possible. And as we all know, this has created a huge humanitarian issue in the Gaza Strip. And we're trying to do so that we can go after Hamas. This is about Hamas in the Gaza Strip. And as you said, there are also the other stages. But for the ground operation, you always do the concentration of forces relatively near where you're going to go into. That's the northern Gaza Strip. I don't think that all of it is to the north specifically. It's in the areas that it needs to be. And all of that is to go in and to tell the civilians, as we continuously do, leave the northern Gaza Strip. That's where we are coming to destroy that Hamas infrastructure.
Colonel Miri Eisen, are you saying that the entire brass is in the north? In conflict, people camouflage, they move away, they hide. How can Israel be so sure that, in fact, everything is located in north and not in south of the strip? This
it's
is
a
one
fair
question. Yes.
No, that's a very fair question. The Hamas infrastructure is throughout the Gaza Strip. And in that sense, when we're talking about the 3 stages, we're talking now, and as the defense minister before that you put on said very clearly, this is something that's going to take a long time. We are initiating first in an area. What we're trying to do is to get as many civilians out of that area. The civilians that are both used as human shields, that are part of the Gaza Strip and part of Hamas, but they need to move out. Once we've gone in a systematic way with all of the challenges that I listened before to the general that was so clear and eloquent, we have learned many lessons, both from the operation that you talked about before, urban warfare, subterranean warfare. These are things that we've been looking at. It still is going to be very difficult fighting. We're choosing the location right now. It isn't that afterwards we're going to let the Hamas continue to flourish in any way in the south. But we need to take care of those civilians. We need to be sure that they're not in the middle of this fighting.
Dan, the second part, when the defense minister said there will be a low intensity operation, what do we Dan make of low intensity operation? Can you have a low intensity operation in a typical urban setting? Is it possible with the booby traps, with anti-tank missiles, with the sort of material which is available and now being published by everyone, that the capability which Hamas has?
So let's take it one step at a time. That's why we're talking about these stages. When we say low intensity, the issue is to be very clear that we cannot crush Hamas, those capabilities and those terror operatives, the way that we perhaps would like to do so, not because of the civilians. There are 2 million civilians there. So you need to do it a stage at a time, which means that they will keep capabilities in the south with those 2 million civilians, those same civilians that there's, the humanitarian aspect, because Hamas doesn't protect them and the world is crying out. And I just want to hope that they can get the basic needs that they need so that it doesn't contradict per se. We are going to go in and be as effective as we can, but that's every house. It's a dense urban area. It's getting into the tunnels. There are going to be heavy casualties on both sides. For a moment, don't think that Israel is going into something easy, both at that first stage and at the second stage. But it's something that has to be done. You don't want Hamas to continue to exist as it does right now. It is truly a threat to the world.
Perfect. We are also joined by Dan Pfefferman. Dan, I elaborated the first stage, the second stage, and the third stage. Third, I'll come a little later. Same question to you. What does one mean by a shallow operation or the low intensity operation? Because when we talk about low intensity operation, I don't think no one is better than India in context of what it means to be in a constant state of warfare. We understand this in context of terrorism in Kashmir, which is sponsored by Pakistan. We know what a low intensity operation is. Now, but even in Kashmir, there are large swaths of land. It's not a typical urban warfare. Such an operation took place, Dan. I was doing my research in Mosul, where people were against ISIS. 10,000 civilians died. I was shocked by the casualties figure. 10,000 people died in Mosul operation. So what sort of a low intensity operation is being conceived or, in your opinion, thought by the Israeli army with the example of Mosul, where 10,000 people died and who were supporting Americans, not radicalized the way they are in Gaza?
Sure, thank you. And hi, Colonel Isa, nice to see you. What we can assume is going to happen is there's going to be a very intense period of fighting that's already begun with the intensive airstrikes, mass ground troops going in, as the Colonel described. They're going to have to go building to building. They're going to have to clear out the tunnels. It's going to be an intense and not so short period where there's going to be a lot of casualties on both sides. From that point on, you need a certain period of time to continue cleaning the territory, sweeping and securing the territory, in which the main bulk of the fighting is over the main pockets of resistance, Hamas infrastructure, Hamas fighters, the command and control centers in the tunnels, the weapon storage. Those are out of the way, but the entire territory is still not secure. This is, after all, still a fairly large city, densely populated, 1 million people, hundreds of tunnels that run underneath. So it's not something that's even going to be over in a short time, but the level of intensity, the level of focus that Israel needs to commit to this is going to be significantly less. Maybe we can compare it a little bit perhaps to what's happening now and what has been happening for the last couple of years in Judea and Samaria, or in the West Bank, however you want to call it, where it is a low intensity conflict spiked by operations from here to there, firefights from here to there, arrests or neutralizing terrorists, and making sure that the terrorist infrastructure is completely wiped out. So that's kind of a middle stage where the intensity of the combat lowers significantly, but it is also a longer stage, and the borders of it are not clear before then Israel can go on to this third stage that Defense Minister Gallant described, which is the rebuilding of Gaza, both physically, but as far as also the kind of regime, the kind of international oversight. I'm not sure who would be involved in that. What is clear from that is that Israel does not want to spend to be invested long-term in the Gaza Strip. Israel wants to get out. It doesn't want to be responsible, not from a security perspective and not from a military perspective, for the Gaza Strip. Israel got out in 2005 and really had no interest or intentions of returning, and of course our hands were forced in this sense.
that, India and Israel has one thing in common, which is hostile neighborhood. But there is also, it's called the anatomy of geography. Like Indian geography creates certain compulsions. For example, the chicken neck or the northeast, or the difficulty of terrain fencing, or India-Bangladesh borders. There are some areas which you just can't fence, line of actual control, where you need constant patrolling. There is also peculiarity of the Israeli border. You have West Bank there, which is right in the middle of the Israeli heartland. And I was going through the data. It says that till 2023, October 7, 29 Israelis were killed in mixed localities. There is a death toll, which is in hundreds. 800 people have already been arrested, which means that West Bank in itself is not quiet. It's slightly restive, it's tense. How do you factor this? I'm not even talking about northern border. I'm talking about the West Bank.
Sure. Yeah, that's something that while we're dealing with this challenge from the south and the ongoing challenge in the north, both in Lebanon and in Syria, where, as the Israeli officials have called it, the war between the wars, or the campaign between the campaigns, that's something that has been ongoing in Judea and Samaria, where there have been pockets of different terrorist elements, and they have committed numerous terror attacks over the last couple of years. And so the IDF has had to focus there. And in fact, one of the reasons why we think that the attention was less focused on the south, and that Hamas was able to achieve what the element of surprise was because there was so much focus on what was happening in this ongoing low-intensity conflict in Judea and Samaria. So it's something that's going to take, Israeli decision makers and military planners are going to have to multitask very carefully and figure out a way, together with the regional actors, perhaps with the United States here, how do you calm down Judea and Samaria while at the same time doing this very complex and long operation in Gaza?
Just for an understanding of to our viewers, Gaza Strip is 40 kilometers long. It's 10 kilometers wide, and there are millions of residents. And I'll give you an example of the firepower. This is Gaza Strip. Imagine Hamas has fired 7,000 rockets. 7,000 rockets. 450 have fallen within Gaza. See, this is how much they have. These terrorists have ammo to waste. 450 rockets have fallen within Gaza of the Hamas terrorists. 7,000 they have already fired. So imagine the stockpile, and we are journalists, we are not intelligence agencies. That we only know a part of the truth, which means that the stockpile must be greater than what they have exhibited. So coming to you, Aditya, keeping in mind the sort of stockpile, the training they have received, the way they have embedded themselves in charities, schools, mosques, civil institutions, how do you, because I'm coming to the third part, and which is the most important part, to change the reality, which means to create a new leadership. When these people are embedded, because the question is also political, how do you distinguish, leave aside the messiness of urban warfare, how do you distinguish, how do you do that?
It's not just a battle that is being fought in Gaza. It's not just a war against Hamas in Gaza. It's a battle of perceptions as well. It's a battle of narratives. There's one war that is underway, Kartike, on ground, where the Israel army and the Israeli Defence Minister has laid out a plan of a three-stage war. Of course, the nitty-gritties and the reality won't be known to us, but this is for the narrative that a three-stage operation will be carried out. But there is a battle of perceptions also, propaganda also. There's a battle of disinformation and misinformation. Over the last many days, we saw this huge kind of propaganda around the Gaza hospital bombing, and immediately international wires, international publications, TV channels all across US, UK, Europe and the Middle East, of course, focused and actually abused Israel, posed questions to Israel, and only in matter of hours, we had evidence pointing out to Hamas. And this actually brings me to your question, and that is that there's this outcry, a humanitarian outcry being created about Gaza, that there's no food, there's no fuel, there's no water, there are no medical supplies. But where are the rockets coming from? I mean, there's enough supply of rockets inside Gaza with the terror organization Hamas, which is a designated group even in the United States. But there's a crisis, humanitarian crisis. Why doesn't the Hamas leadership, which is sitting in Qatar, take the responsibility for feeding the people instead of using them as human shield?
Hamas is not letting them go.
Exactly. I mean, I'm in touch with people indirectly, who want to leave but do not have the avenue to leave. They do not have a political opinion. They actually want to save their
Hamas
lives.
wants to use them like cannon fodder.
Exactly. I mean, not now. It has been using them continuously, Kartike, for many, many days. So, for Israel, of course, they have taken a stance. They have known to change realities in the past as well. They went after the Nazi war criminals, and we know about the Munich killings, etc. And I'm sure, after the southern Israel terror attack, we'll have these Gaza killings, which will be not more in Gaza, but outside, perhaps in Qatar, perhaps in other areas. But that will be in due course. But as of now, I think it will be a Herculean task for Israel.
Can you read that third point? I want you to read the third point, because that's the third point. I want the question to be, I'll take that question to all my guests. That's the third point made by the defense minister. I would really want you to read that particular word, the reality.
Absolutely. It's a three-stage, point that Gallant, the defense minister, has pointed out. He says the third phase will require the removal of Israel's responsibility for life in the Gaza Strip and the establishment of a new security reality for the citizens of Israel.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. General Hasnain, can you please decode it for us? What does it mean?
See, Kartikeya, what you are seeing here is not an operational order. It is what is called in military language an operational instruction, which essentially gives you a broad concept and subsequently leaves it to the lower commanders to determine their objectives and make out their plans. We need not go into too much of detail here to think that all which is written here is a part of the plan. No. The plan will keep unfolding as we go, as the situation keeps changing. Now to come specifically to your question on the third phase, or the third stage as such, the removal of Israel's responsibility. Going back to Jaffna, for example, after the capture of Jaffna, one of the first things that the Indian Army did was to fly in a brigadier from the NDC course here and make him the town commandant of Jaffna, which means the logistics, the people management, the civil administration, all that was brought together. This is exactly what Israel is going to do. Israel will first create a disorder because of the military operation. A disorder will emanate from that. And ultimately, to bring about stability, you have to bring back order. To bring back that order, a change of leadership, a change of the complete system of administration, which ensures that people are still empowered to be able to live peaceful lives, but preventing the any potential terrorists from undertaking terrorist activities in this area. And the one thing which points out very clearly here, all these years, how has Israel allowed this kind of an infrastructure to be built up here? You were talking about missiles and rockets just now, Kartikeya. I have visited Israel. I am aware of it. There are 130,000 such rockets and missiles which exist in the inventory of the Hezbollah and the Hamas. You have only seen 7,000 of them fired. I'm sure Israel is going to make sure that it dismantles all that other capability. And this is going to take a very long time. I can only perceive that phase 3 or stage 3 as they call it will take place not earlier than about 6 months from now. That's the kind of time frame we are looking at.
General, obviously this cannot be compared with Indian operations in Kashmir. They are two different things. But years ago, I read your article on Operation Sadbhavna. Years ago. I think just after you retired from the services, there were a couple of articles you wrote in Sadbhavna. Americans tried creating a new leadership in Afghanistan. They tried creating new leadership in Iraq. We all know the results. When Aditya read that new reality, I'm sure as a journalist I would interpret it as a new political reality. How easy or tough is that, after the military operations, when you try to create a political reality which takes charge of the people, because ultimately military has to recede after a point of time. It has to do its job and go back to barracks.
That's a very good question, Kartikeya. And you can see yourself that in 2019, we took one of the boldest decisions on the 5th of August to resign the Article 370. We've established peace and stability, good tourism, economics becomes the main factor there. But at the end of it, we still have not been able to establish a political leadership. Now that is a very, very challenging task, and it cannot be thrust down. If you do it artificially and create an artificial kind of a leadership, it will only fall flat back on your face. That's the only way it will respond. So there has to be patience, there has to be a build-up over a period of time. Now I'm sure there are lots and lots of Palestinians who are in the West Bank, for example. You already have a ready-made organization like the Palestine Authority. You have Mahmoud Abbas's organization, the Fatah, which is there. I'm sure some means can be found. If they had probably been attempted earlier, some success may have been already met. But I think Israel perhaps invested in some way in Hamas, or allowing them to function the manner in which they did, in cahoots with the government of Qatar, etc. Unfortunately, all that has come to a grinding halt now. A new leadership which has to emerge has to be something which is conducive
but
to what
you know,
the
General Hassan,
international
the reason why I asked about Operation Sadbhavna was because this is the investment of the Indian army irrespective of the government in Delhi and Kashmir, and I have seen women rappers coming out of the Rashtriya Rifle schools being protected by Indian army. And when I had gone 1.5 years ago, I think I was in North Kashmir, somewhere near Kangan, and I wanted that girl to record the song for me. The father was running an ambulance in the civil department. The RR chaps, they barricaded the entire garden, and then the girl came with the family, the sisters. One was a doctor, one was a motivational speaker, and she sang, and I asked her, okay, I understand, this is like the RR guys were all around taking care that no other civilian can come to that garden. And I immediately realized that she wouldn't have been able to realize her dream if Indian army wouldn't have allowed her to do so. So, is there a lesson there what Indian army does? I have respect for Israeli army, I have respect for other armies, but as a reporter I have seen Operation Sadbhavna, and I have seen Indian army doing that peacekeeping thing again in Congo, and the same thing which it does. Is there a lesson worldwide in this context, this sort of an exercise which especially Indian army does?
Well, the Indian army adopted it also, if I may say. We learnt it from the colonial masters of the past. The British army, who did it wonderfully in Malaya, who did it also in Northern Ireland. I visited Northern Ireland and seen some of their programs there. But the Indian army has bettered it all. The unfortunate thing is we are comparing apples and oranges here, because this is a very different situation to what happened in Kashmir. In Kashmir, we have a very, very professional counter-terrorism force, which is the Rashtriya Rifles. The IDF perhaps doesn't have that kind of a force. The IDF believes only in hard power. The Rashtriya Rifles is designed, trained to carry out a balance between hard operations and soft operations. And what you're referring to in Sadbhavna is essentially soft operations. For example, I'm sure Aditya is fully aware of it. In Kashmir, there were no toilets for the girl children. Are you aware of this? It is the Indian army which introduced toilets for girl children. It is to that level we have gone. 43 Goodwill schools where every Kashmiri parent wants his child to go and get admitted. It is that kind of a thing we have been. I cannot foresee the Israeli army working and playing on this kind of a philosophy with the Hamas. It can happen once Hamas has been dismantled. Correct. And subsequently the fight has to be taken to the people in a very in soft operations with the people. That is the time when the IDF must come to the Indian army and perhaps learn its lessons.
That is why I said, the theatre of Gaza and Kashmir cannot be compared. But Operation Sadbhavna is something so unique, it left a very strong imprint on my mind. Colonel Ison, what is your opinion on the third part, when the third part says a new reality? How do you create that new reality? Colonel.
You're asking the questions that I think we're asking also in Israel right now. I don't think that we know. And I don't think that in that sense, it's wonderful that we're going to talk and discuss. And I'll say, new reality, I know very clearly what we will not have there. And that's the Hamas terrorists, their leaders. They won't be there. They will be neutralized. But the 2 million people who are in the Gaza Strip, Hamas grew out of that. It's not an outside force. It is a Palestinian, Arabic-speaking, Gaza-based. Hamas was founded in the Gaza Strip in 1987. So our future, and I very much, as I was listening very clearly to what the general said, and I very much take it to heart in that sense, I too do not believe in our imposing any new kind of order. You cannot do that. In 1982-83, in the First Lebanon War, Israel was heavily burned in our attempt to try and create some kind of new political order in Lebanon. And here we are 40 years later, and look at Hezbollah in Lebanon. So when I look at that third stage, I breathe in deep. I think that we have to be innovative, think outside the box, look at who the people are, and understand that it isn't just offering them things that we think are good. It's also a question of understanding where they want to go. And I pose that right now because I want to hope that the bulk of the people there don't want to participate, to be part of, to be associated with the horrific Hamas terror organization. Having said that, I really don't know what it will look like at that third stage.
And to our viewers, let me make it very clear. Hamas means Islamic Resistance 1. Its charter calls for destruction of Israel. Third, it's inspired by Muslim Brotherhood. So it's not a resistance movement. It has wider implication even for the security of the state of Israel, because the organization says that the Israel should not exist. Dan, can you hear me?
Yes.
So coming to this third part, then how do you separate Hamas and a very radicalized society? You know, because have they become self-sustaining? If I have to be very blunt, you know, have they become self-sustaining?
Hamas, on the one hand, like many things in this part of the world, there are a lot of mutually contradicting things that people somehow live with. On the one hand, a lot of people absolutely have disdain for Hamas because it's a brutal, thuggish Islamist dictatorship. On the other hand, it also enjoys a lot of popularity, and as the colonel said, they are from within the Gaza Strip. They are from within Palestinian society. They do not come and land in from the outside. We're going to have to do something here, and by we, this is something that I don't know if the Israeli government or the Israeli military really knows how to do, and that is a hearts and minds campaign to completely change the reality on the ground and have a new leadership. I don't know what that means. We've seen from the past with Afghanistan. We've seen from the past with
Iraq,
even in Iraq with Halabi and others. You cannot just take in a polished, educated expat from that society and land them in. You do need to work somehow with people who do have internal legitimacy. And I'm not sure how you build that. That is going to be the key element to ensuring that this reality truly is changed. For so long, since 2007, when Hamas took over the Gaza Strip, we've really just been, afraid to pull the Band-Aid on this because of the harm to Palestinian civilians that will come to this, because of the loss of life that is expected for Israeli soldiers, because of the pressure on the Israeli home front.
And Dan, the bottom line is, what is the guarantee? I remember people writing that this is Taliban 2.0 version. Maybe they are different just because they saw them with the cell phones. But what happened? It was same Taliban. The first thing they did in next 30 days or 40 days was took away the rights of women. And even the more brutal version was there in power. ISIS, Khorasan got the space to play there. And then you have Tehreek-e-Pakistan. Islamabad controlling the Kabul government directly. The first version was indirect. The second version became direct. So do you foresee that there's a possibility to end up with even a further radicalized setup there?
Yeah, and that was part of the misconception until now, is that Israel had assumed that Hamas was the least worst of the various groups that currently exist in Gaza, and they had, at least for the last couple of years, acted outwardly in a responsible manner. We now realize that that was a ruse in order to get Israel to lower its defenses and look the other way. What's clear now is that we can no longer live with this reality, and Hamas has to be completely uprooted. That's what's going to take in the first stage. In the second stage, we're going to have to do this low-intensity operation. It's a force that we haven't really done that in quite some time. We're not really built to do that. As the general said, we're built for full-out combat and not for these kind of gendarmerie, occupation rebuilding type management campaigns. That's going to take something completely new. And this is where I actually look for some creativity, and for the regional international community, maybe the Saudis and the Egyptians, maybe the Emiratis or the Americans and the Europeans coming in here and playing some kind of constructive role in helping both rebuild Gaza. And there absolutely has to be a hearts and minds change within Palestinian society here towards living side by side with Israel and not trying to replace Israel as they have tried until now.
Very beautifully put. There was an article, Aditya, I read, I've been to Afghanistan thrice, and I've traveled all the way from Kabul to Mazar-e-Sharif, Jalalabad and to Ghazni. And that article, the position of the Israel is really, really precarious, because they have to deal with this terrorist force Hamas. And not only it's about the national security, it's also about the dignity of the nation. It's also about sending a message. There are a lot of complex things involved, because you can't, because the things have changed after the attack. When the Americans were bombing huge bombs and going after terrorists in Afghanistan, and those bombs were to hit the tunnels and the caves, it made them unpopular in rural areas. And why, Aditya, did that happen? It happened because the reverberation of the bomb was so strong. It would create cracks in the wall of the people, because houses were made of mud. Yeah. So sometimes you don't know how military actions create new social and political impact. So that is why the job of Israel is tough, but it needs to be done. Terrorists needs to be weeded out, and a proper response needs to be given, that you can't get away with this. But then, at the end, let me play out the bite of the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu.
אני פה עם הלוחמים של גולני, הם באים מכל חלקי הארץ, הם לחמו כמו אריות, אם ילחמו כמו אריות, אתם מוכנים להמשך? כן! אנחנו הולכים לנצח בכל העוצמה, אתם מוכנים? כן! כל עם ישראל עומד מאחוריכם, ואנחנו ניתן את המכה הקשה לאויבים שלנו, כדי שנשיג ניצחון.
Literally every major power in the world is gearing up with its own digital currency. And so is India. But India's UPI has taken digital transactions to the next level. So with UPI already